Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra. Today, climate promises are still not enough to avoid catastrophic global warming, UN says. October 27th of 2022, National Public Radio, Morning Edition. An interview with Jennifer Allen of the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Well, according to her, this UN report warns that to avoid the worst dangers of climate change, or just to have a shot, in my words, at limiting warming to 2.7 Fahrenheit, human society needs to cut greenhouse emissions by 45% over the next decade. But horrifically, in my opinion, we are only on track to reduce emissions by maybe, she says, 1%. By 2030. Nor, despite all the talk, has there been much investment in even adaptation to what's happening now or what's to come. She pointed out that during the height of the COVID closures, there was an emissions drop of 7%. Still nothing compared to 45%, but it was a 7% emissions drop. But it's back again now. It was only temporary. When she was asked about China, India, and the U.S., she lamented U.S.-China relations. And she also pointed out how, quote, some countries are even building more fossil fuel infrastructure. Well, I know we, the U.S. of A., are one of those countries. Well, in response to the question, what would these cuts look like? She made a statement that I'm somewhat critical of, and I'll tell you why in a minute. We are all struggling to imagine what this might be. Now, she also added a little more concretely, it would require an all-hands-on-deck approach. Different government departments, businesses, and finance. So one, let me start my analysis with this criticism by this we're struggling to know what it would look like. I don't really agree with that. I've been paying attention to the environmental movement since my pretty early childhood. And specifically during the height of the COVID-19 closures, I cited for you an article, a study by Oxford, claiming that a green recovery would produce more jobs, more wealth for average people than would just business as usual or what they call high carbon solutions. And that green recovery looks pretty much like the same thing I've been hearing from, if you want to distill the wisdom of the environmental movement, my whole life. Reduce, reuse, recycle, renewable energy, organic, local food sources, bikeable, walkable communities, wilderness and natural area set-asides. The main 21st century update is just saying, hey, let's do telecommuting so people don't have to drive around so much. But other than that, the vision's pretty much the same. Only, not that we don't know, the vision's ignored. Those studies by Oxford were ignored by most media outlets, but the ones that didn't were dismissive or derisive. And second, that dip in emissions during COVID should also tell you sometimes the answer is just not doing things. Now, three, when she mentioned finance and infrastructure, I just want to highlight that for you. Okay, by finance, what I believe she's talking about is if the banks are not funding this new fossil fuel infrastructure, it's not going to get built. And the problem most activists have that I listen to with building new fossil fuel infrastructure, yeah, it sounds good. People try to claim, oh, well, it's a transition, blah, blah, blah. The problem with that is then you're putting more money into that industry, giving them more power to then lobby politicians or donate to politicians and influence the media. I just want to highlight the question about India and China and point out the fact that I've heard India and China used as an excuse not to take action here at home going back to the 90s. And I want to point out that all this saber rattling at China, the fact that we've got them totally outgunned with nuclear warheads and troops stationed all along not far away from their shores, well, wouldn't that make anybody feel threatened and want to keep digging up their coal so they're not dependent on foreign energy sources? And then, the fact this is a UN report, well, some people are probably going to now use that as an excuse to dismiss it. Oh, big government, plot, take away freedom. Look, it's just the opposite. You ever heard of Opposite Day? It's that the truth is finally coming out after years of it being suppressed, ignored, dismissed, because there is so darn much money in fossil fuel petrochemicals. Look, that's one of the wealthiest, most powerful industries on the planet. Almost lastly, this concept about avoiding the worst of the effects of climate change. Well, that is totally in line with what I've been hearing or reading places like the U.S. Climate Assessment. You go on your merry way just pumping this biosphere full of greenhouse gases and carbon, you're looking at a much worse future. It's sort of a choice between a slow descent into deeper levels of purgatory or a sudden rapid shift to hell. Look at what just the current 2 degrees of warming have done. Wildfires on the rise, heat waves on the rise, extreme precipitation on the rise, changes in disease vectors. But actually, when I say look at it, that's part of the big problem, isn't it? The media really doesn't look at it. And lastly, the U.S. elections, or really elections worldwide. You've got to vote on the environment. And in the case of the U.S., and I believe in the case of many places worldwide, the Republican Party, or parties like the Republican Party, are for some reason or another locked down by that fossil fuel industry. I've shown you, going to open secrets, the vast majority of fossil fuel political donations are going to Republicans. That too is ignored by the media. And while Democrats disappointingly have, over my lifetime, rarely campaign on the environment, those of us really involved in environmental groups can see they are more influenced by environmental groups. And I've shown you those League of Conservation voter scorecards. Solid evidence that's true. Well, hey, I hope you found this analysis helpful, interesting, somewhat entertaining, and if you did, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel. You click that notification bell, you're commenting, you're liking, and until next time, it is always, oh yes, and please donate at Patreon. This show takes a lot of work to put together, a lot of time, at a big opportunity cost. And as always, until next time, peace be with you.